Settle down, sister.
Nip it in the bud! Let's hear it!
Every time you hear that line again, does it feel a little familiar? The Andy Griffith Show was never a loud kind of show. It was Mayberry, a small town where Aunt Bee's biggest crisis might be a jar of pickles, where Barney could turn everything upside down with one over-the-top plan, and where everything felt as peaceful as an old afternoon you could never quite get back. For 8 years, from 1960 to 1968, the Andy Griffith Show welcomed us into a world so warm, simple, and familiar that it felt like home. And yet, despite how familiar it feels even after watching it over and over again, dozens of times there are still small details right in front of us that most of us completely overlook. From clever behind-the-scenes tricks to the quiet things the show never fully said out loud. Here are 10 small details you may have missed in the Andy Griffith Show. 10. The rock Opie never really threw.
The Andy Griffith Show, starring Andy Griffith, with Ronnie Howard. Also starring Don Knotts.
This is the opening of the Andy Griffith Show, a moment just about everyone who has seen the show remembers. But not everyone realizes that when Opie bends down, picks up that rock, and throws it into the lake, it didn't actually happen the way we think it did. On screen, everything feels so natural that almost nobody would ever question whether that was really the boy's throw. But the truth is, Opie didn't actually create that splash. When they filmed the scene, Ron Howard was only 6 years old. He simply wasn't strong enough to throw the rock far enough to reach the water from the distance the camera required. The crew tried it again and again, but it just wouldn't work. So they had to come up with another solution. A crew member was hidden behind a bush completely out of frame. And at the exact moment Opie made the throwing motion, that person was the one who actually tossed the rock into the lake to create the perfect splash that audiences believed for years. If you look closely, you can even spot a slight delay between Opie's motion and the splash in the water. And maybe that's the most fascinating part of all. Sometimes what stays with an audience isn't something big or dramatic at all. Just a small rock, a still lake, and a trick clever enough to live on in memory for years. 9. The peaceful lake in the opening is one of the show's sweetest illusions.
One day, I snuck away to my secret spot. I hadn't no more'n got my line in when what do you reckon I saw?
What?
After that tossed rock, the thing that probably lingers most clearly in viewers' memories is the calm lake in the opening. Looking at it, people almost instantly believe it must be a real corner of rural North Carolina. A place peaceful enough that all it takes is Andy and Opie quietly walking down to the water for the entire spirit of Mayberry to appear. But the interesting thing is, that iconic fishing hole was not in Mayberry at all. It was filmed at Franklin Canyon Park right in Los Angeles, a large park and a place associated with Hollywood, not a quiet little town the way viewers always imagined. Strange, isn't it? One of television's most iconic small-town America images was actually created in the middle of California. The place viewers thought could only exist in Mayberry's gentle memory turned out to sit very close to the noisy world of Hollywood. And maybe that's what makes this detail so special. The Andy Griffith Show was always like that. It made everything feel so natural that viewers never felt like they were looking at a constructed location. All you see is a small path, a quiet lake, a father and a son, and somehow that alone was enough to make a fictional town feel more real than many real places ever could. 8. That legendary whistle theme once had lyrics.
The Andy Griffith Show.
Just a few notes of that whistle, and I feel as if I've been taken straight back to Mayberry. No need to see Andy. No need to see the country road, the fishing pole, or little Opie walking beside his father. Just one gentle, simple, unhurried melody is enough to bring an entire old memory rushing back. Here's something strangely peaceful about it. But the interesting thing is the melody that we have remembered for so many years as a wordless whistle was not originally wordless at all. Hearing that many people might think, if the lyrics were that good, why didn't the show use them? But the more you think about it, the more the decision to leave the lyrics out feels exactly right. Because the spirit of the Andy Griffith Show was never about explaining how we were supposed to feel. It did not need to say outright that Mayberry was peaceful. It did not need to sing that life there was simple. It did not need words to tell us how unforgettable the father-son bond, the neighborly warmth, and those slow-moving days truly were. The show only needed to let the whistle play, and we felt it for ourselves. That is what made it special. 7. Andy's Unconscious, Tribute to His Father.
I hereby declare you official temporary deputies of the Mayberry Police Force. That is. That means you can put your hands down.
Right in the opening of the Andy Griffith Show, there is a detail that flashes by so quickly most viewers barely notice it. But once you do, you understand why those few seconds stay in people's hearts for so long. Right after Opie throws the rock, Andy gives the slightest nod. It is so subtle that if you're not looking closely, you will almost miss it. Yet that tiny gesture was not random at all. Years later, when watching that opening again, Andy Griffith realized he had unconsciously repeated a gesture his father used to give him when he was a boy. A very short nod. No words, no showiness, but enough to say, "You did good." What makes it special is that it was not in the script. No one asked him to do it. It was simply a natural reflex, a piece of old memory that quietly followed Andy Griffith onto the screen. And maybe things like that are exactly what gave the Andy Griffith Show its unique charm. 6. The calendar in Floyd's barbershop seems to stay in February forever.
Are you he?
Yes, ma'am. I am the proprietor. Floyd Lawson, proprietor. That's he. That's me.
Among the barber chairs, old mirrors, and the familiar feel of Mayberry, there is one thing that seems to have never changed. If you look carefully at the wall behind those familiar barber chairs, you will notice something strange. The calendar there seems to stay in February. It does not appear in for much of the show's run. It stays there unchanged, as if time in Floyd's barbershop quietly stopped a long time ago. Just one episode. It sounds like a tiny continuity error, doesn't it? But the more you think about it, the more intriguing it becomes. The Andy Griffith Show always felt like it existed somewhere outside ordinary time. With familiar places and familiar people, the days drifted by so gently that no one even cared what month it was. That is why the calendar staying in February feels strangely perfect for the spirit of the show. In Mayberry, time does not really move the way we think it does. It simply stays there quietly and so gently that everything feels unchanged. 5. The Andy Griffith Show didn't actually begin the way many people think.
I'm afraid there won't be any time to educate you men in the proper use of firearms. Somebody could get hurt.
Even now, I still think those early years of sitting down to watch black and white movies were some of the most beautiful years of my life. The Andy Griffith Show is remembered for so long, not only because it told the story of a peaceful small town, but also because of the gentle way it entered television history almost perfectly in the spirit of Mayberry itself. Mayberry did not first appear through a grand, highly promoted premiere. It was tested first in an episode of The Danny Thomas Show titled Danny Meets Andy Griffith. In that episode, Danny Williams drives through a small town in North Carolina and is pulled over by Sheriff Andy Taylor for speeding. And from such a simple situation, audiences were introduced for the first time to Andy, his son Opie, Aunt Bee, and the slow, warm, easygoing atmosphere of Mayberry. In other words, the Andy Griffith Show did not enter television with a big splash. It came in through a chance meeting on the side of the road, a small conversation, and a rhythm of life gentle enough to make people want to stay. And that, too, is what made the beginning of this show so special. 4. Mr. Schwamp is a mystery fans still haven't solved.
Mr. Schwamp? Andy?
In a small town like Mayberry, where everyone seems to know everyone else, there is one figure who appears so quietly that the closer you look, the stranger he seems. That figure is Mr. Schwamp. He is not a main character, and he does not have a clear storyline of his own. Most of the time, he simply sits somewhere in town, blends into the crowd, or appears quietly in the background, as if he had always been there. The strange thing is that he almost never says a word. Yet Andy and Barney occasionally call him by name, making that silent presence even harder to forget. And maybe that's what makes Mr. Schwamp one of the most fascinating mysteries in the Andy Griffith Show. To this day, fans still do not know for certain who played him. That is why, even though Mr. Schwamp is only a tiny detail, he became one of the things longtime fans never forget. 3. Opie's mother was almost never really shown.
Yes, son, we did.
And does Aunt Bee have that kind now?
Yes, she does.
Compared with many family sitcoms of its era, the Andy Griffith Show does something very different. It almost never truly shows viewers Opie's mother. For nearly the entire series, she exists only as an absence. No clear face, no personal story retold, no flashbacks to help viewers understand who she was or how she once existed in that house. The show leaves us with almost one brief fact: Opie's mother died when he was very young, and then it stops there. It sounds strange, doesn't it? With a detail like that, most other shows would have told us more. They would have shown her face and told us her name. Or at least left some clear sign of her presence in Andy's house. But the Andy Griffith Show doesn't, and maybe that restraint is exactly what makes the detail more moving. The less the show says, the more clearly you feel the absence that quietly lived in that home for years. It makes Andy feel more real as a single father. It makes Aunt Bee more important. And it gives Mayberry, for all its gentleness, a quiet sorrow that is hard to name. 2. Andy and Barney were originally called cousins.
Deputy Barney Fife reporting, sir, with an important message.
Barney, I've told you don't have to do that.
In most viewers' memories, Andy and Barney are the ultimate pair of old friends. One calm, one impulsive. One always trying to smooth things over. The other always capable of turning everything upside down. But in the earliest episodes of the Andy Griffith Show, that relationship wasn't quite the same. Back then, Andy actually called him Cousin Barney. The show ultimately lets viewers remember them more as longtime best friends than as relatives. It may sound like only a passing change, but when you go back and watch from the beginning, you start to realize that the show you've carried in your memory for all these years isn't quite the same as the show's earliest episodes. Even the relationship between Andy and Barney was once a little different from what we imagined. 1. Barney's middle name was never truly settled.
Gotta get back on the job. It's a jungle out there. I gotta hunt them down.
Nip it in the bud. The moment Barney Fife says that line, we know Mayberry is about to have another little crisis. Barney is the kind of character people think they remember completely. From his jumpy mannerisms to his flustered delivery, the second he shows up, everything somehow becomes funnier. And yet there is one thing the show never kept entirely consistent. Sometimes his middle name is Oliver. Sometimes it becomes Milton. And sometimes the show leaves only a middle initial. At first, that may not sound like a big deal, but the more you think about it, the more interesting it becomes. Because with a character this familiar, even something as basic as his full name can still be left unresolved. And maybe it is those slightly unfinished edges that make Barney feel more human and more endearing than ever. And maybe that is the most special thing about the Andy Griffith Show. It does not stay in people's hearts because of giant twists or noisy drama. It stays because of a thrown rock, a small nod, a whistle, a calendar, frozen in time, a mysterious face, and an absence that was never fully filled. Which detail in the Andy Griffith Show surprised you the most? Leave a comment below and let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can catch the next videos.